They might talk about humour, music, film, books, football and box sets, exercise and maybe even food, trivia and sport, politics and health, sometimes well-being too. On the Life with Brian. On the Life with Brian.
Hello again. You're all very welcome to Life with Brian, episode 31, with me, Mark, and host with the most, Matthew. How are you doing, Matthew?
I'm good, thanks, Mark. Well, I'm a little bit worse for wear because, as Brian knows, I was in Blackpool last night celebrating my birthday with another 90s football legend, Kevin Gage, and Morrissey. So excuse the
Morrissey.
I wasn't out. I was in Morrissey's presence, but I wasn't out with him. So excuse the husky voice. That's why.
And hello, of course, to our overlord, Brian McClare, too. What have you been up to lately, Chocky?
I've been really busy today making raspberry and rhubarb chutney. That's not a joke, that's a fact. That's what I've been doing.
Is that what happens when you move out to the country? You start...
no, that's why I'm here to my age.
I thought you were going to say wine.
That's it. That'll be the next thing, you know. Trampling some grapes and trying to make more wine, yeah.
Make that next before you visit next time.
Okay, and so to our guest. He's a comedian, impressionist, writer and presenter whose TV and radio credits are numerous and include Spitting Image and TalkSport. His podcast and live show, The Political Party, sees him interviewing a political heavyweight in each episode. And he also happens to be a massive Nottingham Forest fan. So the last year or so has been pretty eventful for him. Welcome to the show, which, unlike one of his Edinburgh Festival shows, is completely baby-free. It's Matt Forde. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure. Thank you for coming on and giving us your time.
Oh God, no! This is. I was thinking about this today, Brian. Obviously, you know, I'm a similar generation to the fellas. When I was listening to Manchester United and Status Quo's "Come On You Reds" on tape, I would never have dreamed that one day that I would be on a Zoom call with one of the backing singers of that amazing track.
Brian's actually got a gold disc for that.
No way.
Yeah. It was just that was. I can't remember. I mean, it used to be back in the 70s and the 60s. It was a million. I think it was something like a million records you had to sell, but I think we sold 100,000, at least 100,000 copies of that, and that was enough to meet the criteria at the time, you know. So there is a.
Didn't you knock Stiltskin off number one? I'm sure it was.
You do know that. I do. I would be embarrassed to tell you.
I'm sure it was Stiltskin inside was number one for ages, and then you and your teammates knocked them off the hit parade. And I'm sure you're still spending the royalties, aren't you?
No. No royalties.
Did you not take it? You didn't get any money for that? No?
Oh yeah, there was money generated, yeah, but there was no royalties involved. Yeah,
because it's a really catchy song, wasn't it? It was a really good. Years later, I realised they'd just used another Status Quo song and changed the words.
The guy who wrote it, or the guy who wrote the words, was Status Quo's manager. So all it is a typical Status Quo backing track, and his lyrics, which worked very well, you know, with you know, because it was a cup final song, and there was in those times, and that was part of the tradition to do a song for the cup final.
You actually sing, or were you just mouthing away?
I can't sing at all. I might be able to pick out my terrible voice in it, but that's the wonderful thing about being able to mix stuff into it. So I was shouting or whatever else is part of the thing, but when you're in a gang of people, it's amazing what they can do with mixing stuff and all that. Even then, they didn't have as much of the technology you can do now with computers and
you'll be pleased
sort of stuff. But then you can still make it, and it was like, because when we did it, it was only took a day or something like a day. So he was playing it back sometime in the afternoon and thinking that's amazing to be able to like make us sound as palatable as that. I thought not good, but certainly not like how I know that when I attempt to have attempted in the past and recorded myself singing, which is...
Well, I was actually down at my parents' last weekend, and that cassette single is still in the MIDI hi-fi system that they've still got in their room from about 1975.
Do you know what I remember about it as well? It was the first and I think only tape I ever had that was just in a cardboard sleeve, no plastic.
That is exactly what it is. I saw it last week. It's just like it was one of the early sort of cassette singles, wasn't it? So you actually bought it then, being a Forest fan?
I bought it. I thought it was I bought that, and I think Swamp Thing by The Grid was out at the same time, which was like a sort of banjo dance track.
It was exactly that. What was that, 94, wasn't it?
Yeah.
May 94.
I thought they were both very catchy. So I ended up giving it to a mate at school who's a Man United fan. But I did buy it. I really liked it. I thought it was... And I just think, if you're around that time... I remember going to like the Megastore. My mum's friend was a United fan. And just, as a Forest fan, even then, just being sort of in awe just of the scale of Man United is just off... In English terms, really, there's nothing else like it. So just being slightly overawed, even though obviously it was... As a Forest fan, we probably wrongly saw ourselves as massive rivals to you at the time. So obviously wanted you to lose, but was sort of mad. You know, once you've seen a club of that scale, even as a kid going to Forest, there's like 30,000 people there. It's overwhelming. Once you've been to Old Trafford, it was like going to another country, really. So I think everyone from that period, if you grew up in the 90s, Man United, you're slightly mesmerised by them in the same way that you are like Thatcher or something. It's not something you necessarily agreed with, but like just such a big deal.
But that was the peak of their marketing powers, wasn't it, back then? That was just when United's the sort of cog started to grind into action when it came to United's money-making machine.
The shop was... I remember going into the Megastore and it was just... I mean, at Forest, there was just like... literally, at that time, there was just a window at the back of the main stand that you tapped on and they would slide it open. It was like an ice cream van. They just go, we've got some socks and some balloons and, we've run out of shirts. There's a Megastore at United. I remember they sold flip books of different goals. I don't know if you remember that, Brian, but there was like a Ryan Giggs goal where it was just a flip book. You would just flick it and it was just like one goal. This was amazing. And Man United sweets and like inflate. It was like the Wonka factory for football memorabilia.
You're talking about politics there, Matt, and not necessarily Thatcher, but something I picked up on having read your brilliant book recently, Politically Homeless. I got the feeling that you probably had as many posters of Labour MPs on your bedroom wall as you did Forest players. Is that pretty unusual for you?
Do you know what? I never had posters. I used to write to them for signed photos. Excuse me, I sound all emotional. So I'd put like posters on my wall, but I used to get autographs at every Forest game, and then when I got into politics, it just sort of like, I was a kid. I didn't really see that it was odd to not keep doing that. So whenever there was like a new cabinet minister, I mean, my mum's got boxes of just letters with signed photos in from government departments that don't exist anymore, and like politicians that don't, like people who've passed away. Like there's an amazing, I shouldn't give away a location because there's like a stash under the stairs of like sort of relatively, British history going back to the mid-90s of prime ministers and chancellors and all sorts. I don't think I ever put any of them up. But I certainly collected a lot of, and still do. I still like buy the odd one on eBay.
Well,
that's sad.
No, because I mean, you're talking to somebody who's had pictures of Brian all over his bedroom walls. I did tear them down after you missed that penalty at Highbury. I ripped them all down and then had to stick them together again. But no, I was very much like you, though. I never thought that 20, 30 years on I'd be chatting to him, down a Zoom call or whatever.
No, of course, the score of the winning goal in the 1992 League Cup final against Nottingham Forest.
Well, yes, I was going to bring up that sort of rivalry with United and the Forest because from my memory, Forest always seemed to screw United over. If there was that Bank Holiday Monday game when Forest won at Old Trafford and essentially cost United the league. They always seemed to be involved in sort of quite prominent battles back then. There was obviously the Mark Robbins game.
Yes, of course, the FA
third round. So I think United and Forest have got a bit of, I didn't know whether it was from a United point of view, it was seen as that, or from a Forest fan point of view, they were seen as some kind of rivalry. Because I always thought it was a big fixture, but
it was for us. But I guess United's a big fixture for anyone. But I don't know, for Brian, for you as a player, did it feel like there was a rivalry with Forest?
Oh yeah, absolutely, because they were a very good team. I always loved the way that Forest played. One of my favourite Forest games was the European Cup against Liverpool when the Liverpool came along as the European champions, whatever, and said Forest beat them 2-0. And I loved the players. I loved a lot of the players in the team. I always liked John Robertson was probably my favourite because he was Scottish, you know. But the daft little things. I was. You think of memories of different things. When I was at Villa when I was a kid in 1980, and I remember Forest coming and playing at Villa Park, and Kenny Burns had got. I don't know where he was going, but he got us to try and push his car. It was flat. Battery was flat. Now, I knew a little bit about cars because I used to have to push my mother's car when I was a few years earlier than that. And he was trying to jump-start an automatic, which was not something that was particularly possible. But we managed to get it started. I don't know what we were doing. And the 5 or 6 of us apprentices pushing his, it was a 3-litre Capri up and down the car park, classic car, you know. And eventually got it started, and he said, thanks lads, and he up off, zoomed out of the car park. I don't know idea where he was going, but that's little memories of being in. And when you play against Forest, the way they play football, and then you hear and heard different stories about Clough and his man management and different things was wonderful to listen to, you know. And I know that you've had experiences of helping you with your acne or your eczema or whatever else it was. You know? So, which is a brilliant kind of thing. I mean, nobody. I assume that no one else, apart from maybe his own children, have been given help with their skin. You know, from a legendary football manager. You know? If that's correct, anyway, I don't know if it's right or not. But
you just enlighten us on that story, Matt. For those of us that don't know, I mean, I've heard the story, but
yeah. I was a mascot for a Forest game, one of his last ever games in charge. So it was against Palace at home on the 3rd of March, 93. So it was the first season of the Premier League. And as people might remember, we got relegated that season, and Clough at that point really was falling apart and was in a very bad way. I was a mascot for the game, and I had, and still have, suffer with eczema, but it was on my face as a kid. And Clough, I mean, in those days, the mascot just went into the dressing room and the players were all wandering around naked. I mean, it was just overwhelming. And then there's like the most charismatic thing in the world, Clough, but his face was red raw. And, you know, you could smell that, even as a kid, you could smell that alcohol, but in that very warm, sweet way, like mulled wine. Like it was a pleasant smell. Anyway, they say, oh, Matthew, you know, Matthew's the mascot. This is the manager, Mr. Clough. So, Mr. Clough, nice to meet you. He went, bloody hell, son, you are an ugly bugger. He goes, what's that on your face? He goes, what have you been doing all afternoon? Headbutting pizzas. I said, it's extra, Mr. Clough. He said, I'm only joking. He goes, give your granddad Brian a kiss. He kisses me, then takes me into the physio's room. There's like Roy Keane and Nigel Clough in there getting like their legs rubbed down by the physio. He goes, we need something for this young man's face. And he gave me a pot of something called Betnovate.
Oh, yeah.
And it worked. It was like miracle cream, steroid cream, as I found out. So I had to go to the doctors regularly, and it just cleared it up. It was like miracle cream. I couldn't believe it. And he says, oh, crikey, you know, what's happened if you've taken wheat out of your diet or dairy or something? I said, no, I've got Betnovate. Brian Clough gave it me. I said, I've got Betnovate because you can't put it on your face. It's steroid-based, it causes skin cancer. It was tested on horses. Where did you get it? I said, Brian Clough gave it me. And he immediately went, you met Brian Clough? And my mum was like, has my child got skin cancer at the age of 7 or not? Like, is his flesh safe? Never mind that he's met Brian Clough. She thought he was so immature for being impressed. But anyway, what it led to was I was prescribed Betnovate, and I'm still on various steroid creams that I use from the neck down and periodically use Humavate on the face. But effectively, Cloughie cured my eczema. And then years later, I've got a photo, which I'll show you. I got, on the day, there's like a club photographer there. And I got a photo of him in his green jumper hugging me in my Forest kit in the dressing room. And then years later, signed up to get it, queued up to get it signed when he brought his second autobiography of it out. I got to the front of the queue and I said, oh, can you sign this as well, please, Mr. Clough? And he looked at the photo and went, I looked a lot better back then. So did you fat bastard. And the only 2 times I met him, he was appalling to me. But what a great... I've just held it up at the camera so you can see it, because you can see his face. It's so red there. And you can see how nervous I am as a kid.
Oh, blimey.
But I mean, I look like a ghost compared. But like,
He needs Venovate in his face.
well, exactly. Red Raw, but it was an amazing. What incredible! I mean, imagine you had a story like that about Shankly or Busby or Paisley or something like that. Right. Ferguson. These people are gods, aren't they? And he was the last of a particular type.
Was he a character that you came across, Brian? Obviously, in the opposition dressing room.
Only just playing in the games and all that kind of thing. But there were several people in there along the journey, the coaching journey, who had played with Clough, and you'd always love to listen to. And like Matt was doing there, Brian Laws, who played for Forest for a long time, he was brilliant at doing a Cloughy accent and all the kind of things, and telling you just to him and know that kind of way like you just did there, Matt, was wonderful. Listening, you could shut your eyes and it'd be like listening to him on my first memory of him would be on doing the television on ITV or whatever it was, maybe the cup final or England games and all that, and then giving his forthright opinion. And Brian Laws was fantastic at coming out with that. And I love the little kind of things about how he did about man management, different things, and that he and the non-training stuff, and then the bizarre kind of, well, bizarre in the sense of what I had experienced would be when, like you'd win the game and say, I'll see you on Thursday. Now, maybe he wasn't then until Thursday, but the players were in. I'm not quite sure, but there was one that I loved that kind of resonated with me, and that around about that time of the great team in the early 80s or 79, 80, whatever, the first pre-season, and it happened with Man United as well. You would go and train in a local park where there'd be loads of other people running around and people walking their dogs and all that kind of thing. And he'd taken them down with Peter Taylor, and they got to this park and he says, right, I want you to run right through there. And the players are looking at him going, well, sorry, Gaff, you're on about, run right through to that tree. In front of that tree was 50 yards of nettles, but growing right up to almost your chest, The players are going up, they're all there, short sleeves, some have shorts on. No, what are you on about, Gaffer? Just you on, son. She's do his effort right, and the ones that did it, he kept, and the ones that refused, he got rid of.
Oh boy!
So that was a measure of whether you were going to go, not just for him and Peter, but for your teammates. Are you a team player? Are you willing to sacrifice? And the sacrifice was that you're going to get stung to fuck. Right, but the ones who bottled it, he just went, nah. And I think even maybe that day he got the ones into the office and said, right, you're on the transfer list and we'll be listening to offers for you now. And it didn't matter who it was and what they'd done the previous year or whatever. It was all to do with his idea. And I think having lived with Ferguson for so long about what the expectations were, and it wasn't going to kill you, It was uncomfortable when you would go maybe have to find some other kind of ointment in the physio's bag for that particular evening, all over your legs and all that kind of thing. But I love that sort of stuff, and just the kind of way that he was. And as he travelled kind of through the journey and learned different things, it is a pity that he was never England manager. And I'm not saying how good he would have been as a man, but those kind of be able to get players. I mean, you've watched Forest, you started watching at that time. Some of the performances of players and teams were incredible, really. There was never any real stars, taking a group of players, forming them into a team, winning the second division, promoted, and winning the first division, and then the following year winning the European Cup. That is astonishing stuff. And then the year after that, winning the European Cup again, and having done it before is also at Derby. His feats are incredible, really, for management and getting performances out of players. And then he took loads of players. I mean, he took loads of players with him, didn't he? McGovern's no hairs with him, Mackay's, a lot of Scotsmen as well, which I loved that as well. But the only kind of thing that we could see when I grew up in that time was that you'd see the highlights of these European games, and it was wonderful. I played it in a European game for Celtic at City Ground in a absolutely frozen solid pitch. We drew 0-0, but we got done 2-0 at home.
There's a bowl commemorating that game in the Forest boardroom to this day.
Is it?
Yeah, it's like a sort of just like a sort of silver bowl. And the last time I was in there, I was looking at stuff because we've got the European Cups in there. They've got a couple of Littlewoods Cups, a few odds and ends, but like almost in a very prominent position is a silver bowl commemorating Celtic Forest in the European Cup.
That would have been because Celtic always gave a gift.
Yes.
So whatever that started, it might have started with Matt Busby or early on. They always took a gift for the opposition team, and it used to be something like some representation of either club or something that would be inscribed as in that a commemoration of that particular game, because there was, as you know, there was a lot fewer European ties then. That's maybe why,
Well, it's still there.
So I think somewhere there's a job lot of those commemorative bowls. Knocking around. Brian, you'll be making your chutney in one probably. I suppose we're talking Forest now. I mean, I wanted to go into some talk about a bit of politics later, but seeing as we're talking Forest, I mean, let's talk about the here and now. Is it as rosy as you expected it when you won at Wembley back in the spring, being back in the Premier League?
Yeah, it is. It sounds odd given that the last couple of games, but we just waited so long for it. I waited 23 years. The last time we were in the Premier League was 1999. I was doing my GCSEs. I was 16. I grew up with Clough managing Forest, with Pierce, going to watch you play Man United, Liverpool, week in, week out. Reaching cup finals was the norm. And then to go through the period that we've been through, that was the worst thing. So getting promoted was amazing. Being back in the Premier League is great, even though it's going to be very, very hard. I'd still rather be losing a couple of games in the Premier League. I mean, we started worst last season in the Championship. I think we lost like our first 6 or 7 games. We've started better in the Premier League than we did last season. So it still is a wonderful kind of magical experience. Obviously, I don't want us to get relegated, and it's embarrassing if you get beat week in, week out, but I think we're playing pretty well and scoring goals. And it's just small things like having the Premier League logo on the side of the shirts, and just the step up between when you're playing in the Championship and it's on telly, and when you're in the Premier League and like the world's there and all that sort of, there is an atmosphere and there's a difference in the quality of the football. And obviously, for a long period of time, at the back of your mind was just the nagging, appalling doubt that you might never actually get back. Yeah. That so many people had tried, that so many people, managers, players, owners, whatever else, that you started to, on some level, doubt that we would ever get back there. So just phenomenal to still be in the early months of reliving, for a whole new generation of people. If you're under 30, really, you've never seen Forest in the Premier League. You can't remember them. It's bonkers, that. 3 decades, really, of people being alive without seeing it. So it is still exciting, even if some of the results would share.
I noticed, listening to you and seeing you on Twitter and what have you at the end of last season, and all through the summer, really, how much it actually meant to you. And it was quite refreshing because quite often on this show we talk about people getting disillusioned with football and they can't be falling out with it and falling out of love with it. And I probably put myself in that position. And I haven't mentioned your book again, Politically Homeless. I mean, you kept the fact that your love for the Labour Party in recent years has diminished quite drastically. And I was thinking, what is it about football that doesn't let you down like a political party has, really? I mean, that's what it seems to me. Like, the football is always going to be there, whereas if your love of a political party can obviously come and go, as you've explained.
Yeah, football's more important to your identity, isn't it? You don't swap and change. Once you've got your football club, that's it. And for me, it's where I grew up. That's why I'm a Forest fan, as I grew up in Nottingham and my whole family supported them. So it's a big part of who you are. And for most places, the football club is the biggest thing that happens in that city. Certainly for a city the size of Nottingham, it's the biggest deal is Nottingham Forest. And for that city not to have had Premier League football drives you mad. And for 23 years, really, incrementally, when I first started going to watch football, it was to watch Forest win. It was to watch Forest win games on the whole and maybe have a cup run and maybe actually win a trophy. Then, as the years clicked by, I had to incrementally readjust to football becoming more about the day out. And it didn't matter if we won or not, because we're not in control of that. And including the 3 seasons we had in the 3rd division not that long ago, it just had to become about mates and going back up to Nottingham and going to the games and all that. And then in the end, that's not fully satisfying enough. If you support a club of Forest, and every club is different, but for a club like Forest, there's always that itch that you should be back there. And it's all anyone ever talks about. And every time you're on the telly, you know, that it's about, you've won the European Cup twice and now look at the state of you. And it actually becomes embarrassing and deeply frustrating. What's great about football is at some point it can always pay off. It is never, ever too late. There is always a chance that next week or next season things will turn around. And you see it happen for loads of clubs. Clubs that never thought they'd ever be in the Premier League, like Brighton and Bournemouth. And Wigan. And Swansea probably never thought they would. And they've all been there and been out of it. And it's just that incredible thing now that you think, actually, there's probably not a club in England that at some point couldn't realistically think, we might actually do it. And whatever doing it is, within the LDV vans or whatever it's called now, or getting promoted. So it's just that thing that if you're a football fan, you've always got something that firstly brings you together with the people that you like spending time with and gives you wonderful days out and amazing. There's always something happening. There's always the chance that you will do something. But for Forest, that delayed gratification, all those years of pain were finally worth it. In the same way that it would, you know, when England got to the final the other summer and when the Lionesses won, if England do something at the World Cup, it is all those years of pain and hurt that in the end, that's why the satisfaction was so big. I think if you yo-yo all the time, you're constantly up, down, then of course each successive promotion, it probably does mean a little bit less if you're in a sort of West Brom situation. But if you're where we are, that was the release of a quarter of a century and really a bit more because it started to get rubbish before we went down in 99. That was just all that. That was pent up frustration, humiliation, hurt, crap games after, you know, just everything. And that was why it was so special. So I just think football gives you something that nothing else gives you. And I don't think other sports get near it. Obviously, people go to rugby, people can go and watch other team sports. Football is unique in what it means to people. More people go and watch it. There are sort of class reasons and history reasons for that. But it is the biggest thing that will happen in any city on any given day. Nothing else is happening. I often say this to people who aren't into it. I was like, how are you not even a little bit curious? You know, if you live in Manchester, you've got United and City. I mean, think about the amount of people that are going to a game on any one weekend, even just in that part of the country. Think of Glasgow and the two stadiums. Why would you not go? There's over 100,000 people just in this city losing their shit every weekend over this. There's got to be something in it. So I just think people who aren't into it, and I know I've deviated from the question, but I just think it is the most fun you will ever have.
When you went to...
people don't get it, I think they're mad.
When you went to QPR and they were singing about you, I believe, or chanting about you. So
yeah, they were. Yeah, QPR away.
Which part of your small boy going to watch football what did you think about that when they were...
Man, I mean, they were obviously heard an abuse. It was funny. They were going, your show is on Dave, your show is on Dave, your jokes are shit, and your show is on Dave. Which I just thought was amazing. Because, you know, as a fan going to watch, firstly, it meant that I was probably sat too close to the away end and probably should have been more aware of my own behaviour. But it was such a cool thing to have just that one brief moment where you're getting singled out by away fans for the state of your career. That's such a cool thing, isn't it? Like to have been abused even by a pocket of QPR fans. I thought it was a great badge of honour.
I was going to say that when you were talking about the joy of that you felt when Forest got promotion back. I mean, is it comparable to May 1st, 1997, or in 2 years' time, if there's a general election, if there's not one before that, would a landslide Labour victory fill you with the same sense of euphoria, or is it a completely different feeling?
I think they're quite similar. I think football is more, and it is more personal, it feels, to football. But what those two things do have in common is, for the Labour Party, they've had to wait a very long time to even be in contention, and they did last time. And part of the reason why 1997 is such a landmark for people who were around, as we all were at the time, is, particularly if you wanted Labour to win, is they again had waited so long, and the public had waited so long to be able to vote for them in those sorts of numbers. The public had wanted Labour to be sensible. They finally did it, and it ushered out, those last years of the John Major government were just hell for everyone, including, I think, people in the government themselves. So, and then it did feel like an explosion of hope and euphoria for people. So they are very similar. You invest, if you're into politics and you invest a lot of time in a political party, all your hopes and dreams kind of get funneled through that. And the things that you can do if you win a general election are huge. Equally, when you get it wrong, the effect on people's lives, as we're seeing this week, is profound. You're going to tip people into poverty and unemployment, and people get their homes. The power that you have at the centre of government is huge to do good or bad with. So absolutely, if your team wins, particularly I think if you're Labour, and you've had, on the whole, history says you're more likely to lose a general election than you are to win it, to get the sort of victory that Labour had in 1992. And it wasn't just that they won, it was just that the scale of it was insane. Yeah. In 1992, when they think they're going to win and they lose, at that point they think we're never going to win again. And you look at the parallels now, in 2019, with the result that Corbyn got, people were like, well, the Labour Party is now dead. Basically impossible for them to win the next election. Now there's an opinion poll out today that says the Tories will be lucky to get 3 seats.
Yes, I saw that. It's funny because I've heard you talking on a number of podcasts. I think it was on the Quickly Kevin one where you were talking about May 97 as a month and you're looking back and just hearing you describe it. And, I'm of a similar age and I remember that night well, and it was just such a monumental occasion, wasn't it? Because none of us really, with the exception maybe with you, Brian, no offence, but none of us had seen anything like that before because we just all grew up thinking, well, this government's just going to be there forever. And, that I remember watching the TV coverage right through until 6, 7 o'clock in the morning the following day and Blair addressing a new dawn has broken, has it not? And just hearing you talk about it and made me realise what a huge event that is. And I suppose it could happen again. If it happens again, it will be a similar kind of time difference, won't it? It would be another... Well, what was it, 18 years, wasn't it? I mean, it's not quite that yet, but I mean, we could be looking at that kind of period of time by the time it comes around again, depending on whether you believe the opinion poll.
Well, that's, I mean, since 1970, 5? Labour have only come into government twice.
Yeah.
It's just mad that actually, you'd have to go back to the 70s before Blair. There's only one person alive that's won a general election for the Labour Party. And that's just absolute. When you consider how many already former Tory Prime Ministers there have been since 2010.
Yeah.
There's only one person alive that ever won an election for Labour. So that in itself tells its own story. But I think what anything at elite level does, like football and politics, is occasionally you get a moment where someone who is in the right position at the right time is the right person for that thing. And World Cups reveal that, and Premier League titles reveal that, and general elections. Blair in 97 was absolutely the best politician in the country, and he became Prime Minister. And at the moment, we've had a run of people who, frankly, are not the best politicians in the country. They're not even the best politicians in their own constituency, running the country. And I think that's what's driven people mad is it's not even about whether you're left wing or right wing for most people. They just want the best person for the job. Yeah. And we just haven't had that on both sides. Giving people a choice between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, that was just like an insult. That was an insult to every single voter up and down this country, because whether you want the Tories to win or Labour to win, they were not the best people to run those parties. And it told you so much about how far both parties had drifted from what politics is meant to be and what the people of the country actually want. Whereas Labour now is getting its act together. The Tories have just gone absolutely crackers with mistrust.
I was going to ask you about the current situation, but you were saying something, I think I might have been listening to your chat with Gordon Brown at Edinburgh. It might have been another political party, but you said at some point that the talent that Labour had in that cabinet at the time, and people like Robin Cook and Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, as a team, yeah, I mean, we've probably not seen anything like that since. And I'm just wondering what you're making of the current situation. Like you say, Labour seems to be maybe turning a bit of a corner. But
well, those great new Labour years were like the Clough years. It was built on a lot of Scottish talent. There was like you say, Gordon Brown, Alistair Darling. Obviously, John Smith had led the party. So many incredible people. George Robertson. It was just Scotland was like an engine room, not just for Forest European Cups, but for the new Labour government. I mean, I'm not sure if that was something that you picked up on, Brian, at the time, obviously, like playing Premier League football in the 90s, where the footballers were talking about that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing you're talking about, it's a totally different experience being in Scotland, because Scotland had, right through my whole period up to recently, voted Labour. And you couldn't understand why there's these other parts of the country who I thought was similar to Scotland would be voting for Margaret Thatcher, for example. It was the most pertinent one in my youth, and and we always found it, certainly me growing up through that period of time, found it so difficult to come to terms with this idea that there'd be these people, very similar circumstances, maybe not so much me because I was playing football even then, but to my parents and the rest of my family would be even think about voting for anything, well, certainly voting for the Tory Party and for what they stood for, you know. I mean, I read an interesting thing that you mentioned there, that you felt, or assumed that you felt that the Prime Minister's role, or the job of the Prime Minister, is the most important job in the UK now. And that person who has the job as Prime Minister should be impressive.
Yes.
Now, who was the last impressive Prime Minister that we had?
Yeah, you'd have to go back a fair few.
I mean, in your opinion, who was the last?
I think Gordon Brown was impressive.
Prime Minister.
I think Gordon Brown was impressive, and I think for whatever his faults, he used power for the right thing. For instance, after the global financial crash, I think having an economic brain like his, with Alistair Darling as his Chancellor, was crucial in rescuing the global economy. I think you could say that in terms of presentation, David Cameron had a sort of something quite impressive about him. And I think after that, I think the last really impressive, the last one that you'd say was a megastar was Tony Blair, where you'd say he almost feels like an American president. But Boris Johnson and Truss and Theresa May, I just think each one has just got progressively worse. And each time you go, well, it can't be worse than this. I mean, even like a fortnight ago, people go, well, now that Boris Johnson's gone, at least we've got someone more sensible in charge. And literally, I think everyone in the country is going, I genuinely think Boris Johnson was a more serious politician than this.
Yeah. What do you make of what we've seen in the last couple of weeks with, let's say, Labour particularly? Because, I mean, do you think Keir Starmer's starting to step up to the plate to be this potential statesman?
Definitely. I think the thing is, obviously, the one thing people say about him is, oh, he's a bit boring or he's a bit stiff. I really don't care about that. Having a boring Prime Minister would be a wet dream right now. I think most people don't find the fear of having their house repossessed that exciting. The effect of having people like Boris Johnson in charge is actually that people's lives get a lot worse. So there's a kind of superficial attraction sometimes. Obviously, you want someone who's charismatic because they're representing the country on the global stage, but I think Keir Starmer would more than adequately represent Britain abroad. I think we're becoming a laughingstock, and he would put a stop to that. And I think he understands what the problems of the country are, and he's a talented, clever man who would solve them. And compared, I mean, every election is a choice, compared to Liz Truss, who doesn't just look out of touch and weird, but is just completely reckless and has done something so dumb with the economy. With COVID or with Ukraine, people might disagree with what the UK government did throughout that period, but what they all know is they didn't plan to have COVID. This came out of nowhere and they had to react to it. So there's always a level of, not sympathy, but understanding that you couldn't get it all right. What they did this week was entirely their own decision for no good reason. And the reason they do stuff like this is they belong to a very, very small group within the Tory Party that is highly influential, that are effectively libertarians, who all they ever want to do is just cut taxes for rich people. That is their one thing that they're obsessed with. Now, obviously, Tories on the whole always look to lower the tax base. That's what that is an ideological position. But most of them will say, including, I mean, look at the effect that even the Tory party is saying, don't do this now. Even Tories obsessed with tax cuts are going, what are you doing? Because you cut taxes when you can. You don't do it at a time when it's irresponsible. And the markets that the Tories are meant to be the party of think this is appalling. Their own supporters think it's mad. The effect of it, if this carries on, this sort of currency crisis, the effect that it will have on people's lives, and it's not just about looking at a graph and going, oh, that looks shit. Oh, it's gone down, so they're bad. This is people's mortgages. This is people losing their homes, losing their jobs, not being able to afford to heat their home. This is as bad as it gets. And they did it they didn't have to, they weren't reacting to a crisis. This was ideological at the wrong time. And I don't think people will forgive them for it. I think it was just completely indulgent. And I don't think they look like they're in control at all. And Kwasi Kwarteng, whatever you think of any of the chancellors, the last few that we've had, all of them at least tried to look serious and calm and almost diligent. He's this sort of braying, right-wing, yob's not the right word, but he's not got the right temperament for it. He's not trying to calm things down. He likes a row, and you just think that is not what you want in a chancellor. A chancellor should be the person saying, actually, I'm going to be guided by the numbers. Even whatever you think of Philip Hammond or Rishi Sunak. I mean, Rishi Sunak now is like Mystic Meg. He was saying this was going to happen. He was telling Liz Truss to her face a few weeks ago, if you do what you're going to do, this is what's going to happen. And he was proved absolutely right. So there were more sensible people in the Tory party. They weren't listened to. And this is what happens when parties...
Why did the
parties are mad, is
why
the
did the
short
Tory
version.
faithful choose her? Why did the Tory faithful choose her?
Because she wanted to cut taxes. And this is the problem, is tax cuts to the Tories are like catnip. Like, if a Tory leader said, if there are two candidates and one of them says, I will cut your taxes, literally, they get such a boner for it, they can't see anything else. It's just, they get completely distracted by tax cuts. And hearing Rishi go, oh, well, maybe in the future, and it just didn't do it for them. The thing that gets them rock hard is I will cut your, even at a time where it's going to cause economic mayhem, that all that just melts away. And I think part of it was the membership is still quite loyal to Boris, and they saw Rishi Sunak as being more treacherous to him. So there was that. There was like a sort of pro-Boris element to Liz Truss's support. But I think fundamentally it was tax cuts. And here we are. Look at the effects of them.
What strikes me, and again, it's not a right wing or a left wing thing, is when you talk about, we said about the Labour Party in 97, right through that period, and they all looked like they knew exactly what they were doing. Whether you agreed with them or not, their PR machine was spectacular. I mean, obviously you've got people like Mandelson behind that. But the last few prime ministers and governments, you just think, is there no one in the back room saying, I wouldn't say this if I were you, or don't do this? I mean, that's what amazes me. Is that, especially during the COVID situation, those daily briefings, and not necessarily the parties, because we didn't know about that at the time, but going on television on a Saturday night to make a big announcement and then delaying it by a couple of hours because someone said, "Oh no, hang on a minute, Strictly Come Dancing." So I mean, I think, how is there someone there not going? I don't think that would have happened I know that wouldn't have happened in the Blair government. Someone would have been all over that.
I think they employed better people then. I mean, politicians employ people according to their character. So Tony Blair is an elite politician who employs elite people because he wants them to say, I think that bit's wrong. Sort that out in private so that when it's in the public domain, you've got it right. Some politicians don't agree with that. Some politicians just employ loyal people who tell them they're great. And when the quality of the politician diminishes, the quality of the advisor tends to. Now, there will be people there saying, don't say that. A lot of them will be civil servants. I mean, imagine what was going on in the Treasury when they were saying they were going to do this, because there's financial experts who've served the country for years. Governments of all colours will have known, and they will have begged them not to do it. But this is the problem when you get politicians. The Tory party basically, and it's always had a mad element, and every political party has a nutter element to it. But basically, since Brexit onwards, the Tory party has gone fully mad. It has not listened to those calmer, more centre-right voices about sound money and keeping spending and taxation, cutting taxes where you can, but really valuing sound public finances. It's now in the hands of effectively libertarian zealots who just go, well, we're going to cut it and we're going to cut taxes. We don't care what the Bank of England says or the IMF. We're just going to do it, and it's worth the pain. And the problem is they're so obsessed with politics, they forget what politics is for. And I know that sounds stupid, but they're so obsessed with being these sort of like buccaneering Tory Brexiteer types that they forget that politics is about solving people's problems and giving people hope. And that in itself, if you educate people, you keep them healthy and you give them good jobs, that is economic reform as well. People earn more and they pay more in tax. It makes economic sense to create a better country, let alone like a moral cause behind it. They're just playing a game, these people. They don't care about poverty or inequality or education or public services. They're there just to win a little argument in their little group of mates. And they were allowed to do that for a long time because the Labour Party had gone batshit. But the Labour Party's not batshit anymore. It's sensible. And they've got a leader who looks like a prime minister. And that's why I think they'll probably win the next election. I just think the scales have shifted since 2019 so quickly that people are going, actually, you lot are irresponsible. Even Tories are saying, I cannot vote for this. And when that happens, I just think it's game over.
I think you're right. And so much so that when I wrote the script for this, when we were going to do it a couple of weeks ago, I actually was going to make a gag about the Labour and Man United being, unwinnable, unelected. Now it's all changed. United aren't looking that bad, and Labour look like they could win the next election. So I can't even make that comparison now. But it is incredible how in the space of a couple of weeks, it's almost like it's just flipped.
But all that stuff is stuff that's going on behind the scenes with Labour. Like, this has just been incremental since Keir Starmer came in. He's just incrementally moved Labour to a point so that when the time comes, they're ready, and the time has come. And the Tories have forced the time. The Tories have brought. It didn't have to be like this. They could have made it harder for Labour, but they've made it so easy, and they've made it, I think, easy for Starmer specifically, because I think the public really like him, and they go, "I'd rather have him in charge," and they've handed it to them. I don't think they can win the next election now. I think they've absolutely. I just don't think you can ever get once you've. I mean, she's only been Prime Minister 5 minutes. What a terrible start! All her own fault. I just think it's over for her. I don't think you ever get it back. Even if things recover, people will go, "This is too risky." And this is the other thing that drives me mad. The only reason they made this announcement at the time they did is because they let us all dangle over the summer. They didn't give a shit. When people say what's going to happen about these energy prices, they're going, "We can't deal with it now because we're having a leadership election." Or the next guy will deal with it. We're not ordering toner for the photocopier. We're not waiting for the new rep to start. This was for months and months and months. Families have been trying to save what little they can, putting pennies into different pots for heating and eating, petrified, because the government didn't have the respect to say to them, "Don't worry, we will sort this. Whoever takes..." They could have both said, "Whichever one of us wins, we will sort this energy crisis. We will cap it." They could have both said that, and then neutralise that on each other's campaign. They both chose to do fuck all summer, and they were all totally fine with it. Millions of people. I mean, I just don't think they understand how people feel. I mean, just in general. Life is scary, and a good politician says, "I'm going to take this pressure away. I'm going to do everything in my power so that you can sleep at night. You have a better life." And life is shit for so many people. And I just think and it's not just those people that are pissed off now. Everyone is pissed off. They're just going, "You have totally lost the trust of all of us." And I just think they thought they could win forever. And when you think you can win forever, you make daft mistakes. You choose Boris Johnson and then you choose Liz Truss. And the public take that as the insult that they should absolutely have taken it as.
People have been critical of Keir Starmer for not saying this and not doing this and not stepping up to this when it came to the previous Prime Minister. And whether he's had some kind of incredible foresight to see that just let him bumble along, and that his own party are going to turn against him and eject him from that post. And then outside that, it's quite clearly has happened. Everyone else who was put themselves up for leadership of the Tory Party, and then we're going to be the next Prime Minister. We're going to make a complete and utter mess of it. Maybe if Sunak had got the job, it might have been a slightly different situation. But just as Matt said there, it's for me, the way that this is kind of played out is Monty Python-esque. And it must be, for people like Matt, it must be a piece of piss, this sort of thing. And in a way you think, and I saw something else you said, is that it's difficult to make humour out of it because it, in a way, I know a lot of stuff is tragic and all that kind of thing, but it's so fucking funny. You can't make it up, Sometimes you just can't make stuff up because this is what they're doing, and it's like, I watched a little kind of, I know that you can be very influenced by little bits of editing on media, social media and all that kind of thing. But I watched a kind I did editorial clips of some stuff that the now Prime Minister, leader of our country, had somebody put together with regards to sort of being asked simple questions, right? Like we're doing now. So we spent some time, most people, I would like to think, spend some time doing a bit of homework so that, and we know that how politicians will ask the question but they'll ask something else. She couldn't fucking come up with something else. She's just fucking a bumbling buffoon, and I'm going, what the fuck did people see? So they're getting up and I'm thinking, if anybody said to me, right, and for lots of different reasons, look, I'm watching through, and I know you're following it all the time, Matt, was that I'm thinking she's going to get in because she just, whatever it is she's got, is just enough of bullshit to get in. But there's no fucking substance to it whatsoever. In fact, she's an idiot. And she's an idiot, right? So if I was looking at that from the leader of an opposition party, I'd think, fucking let them go on with it and see what happens. Particularly, you think, well, surely they're not going to now live by the promises that got her elected to the leadership of the Tory Party, and now the head of the country by saying, yeah, we're going to do this now. We're going to cut the taxes for those few people, and then they go, right, this is what we're going to do, and the people right at the bottom are benefiting to the tune of 79 pence a week or something like that. Top end, hundreds of thousands. In the middle bits and pieces, a different thing. But in the meantime, every time you go somewhere to get whatever it is you need, you go to the supermarket, you go, hold on a second, that was only £1 last week. Why is it £1.25 this week? And the heating, and never mind just the cost of heating. Is there going to be any heating? Are we going to have any fuel? Well, nobody said that. We don't worry about that. You'll be fine. We might not have any fucking fuel, to pay for. We'll all be sitting like we did in the 70s, and I remember it, fucking 3 day a week, fucking run, learn, look for the candles. That may happen this winter. And so if you're sitting in the opposition, you go, get on with it, and you get to such a desperately bad point that you go, well, really, they've done the job for you. Get to the point where you would say, well, and you think that people, like Matt said there, who've been doing this sort of stuff all their lives, whether it's economists, whether it's advisors, whether it's politicians, would say, hold on a second, if you want to be successful in this job, listen to this guy and maybe bury your pride and go, listen, okay, maybe it didn't quite work out that way. Let's retract, or we'll move into this, but not just keep fucking ploughing down the same road, because it's just about ego. It's about you and what you think. And politicians are elected, in my view, to serve the people that elected them. In government over the last few years, there's far too many people there. It's about what is it for them. Boris Johnson wanted to become Prime Minister because he wanted to make money. He didn't want to do a good job as a Prime Minister. He wanted to make fucking money. And even though he was shit at it, he will probably make money because some fucking idiots will buy his books or fucking book him into some fucking daft fucking political tour. Or
he's coming on our show next week, Brian. Didn't I tell you?
No. So, you'd be sitting there lapping it up. You'd think, go, right, on you go, guys. Just thinking in football, like you mentioned there, if a team is all of a sudden saying, it's a daft little thing, Matt, but when Newcastle were flying high under Kevin Keegan, and he had that fucking meltdown where he went, I'd love it and all that. I'm sure you can do a Kevin Keegan. I love it and all that kind of thing. He made a massive mistake that fucked him up. Do you know what he did?
What? Like,
at that time, there was no transfer windows at that time. Right? So they're flying. They're playing the best football. They played the best football that year, no question about it. And in the right circumstances, should have won the league. United we were a decent kind of functional kind of unit and had unbelievable performances out of Peter Schmeichel and match-winning performances from Eric Cantona, and everybody else is kind of flitting around it, right? They were flying, so much so you're thinking, 17 points, Matthew, was it something like that?
17 points? 11.
11, was it 11-point lead to get, right? And everyone's going well, everyone's fitting in, their players are all happy, and he goes and signs Asprilla.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, a random kind of thing, an ego signing. This maverick football player, good football player, but a maverick football player from South America. I think he was playing in Italy at the time. Okay. Brings him, and it fucked up everything in their thing. Fucked up all the training, fucked up the dressing room, and it fucked up the team because he had to play him. And that was a mistake that he made, but he ploughed on with it with this kind of idea that we'll get away with it because we're 11 points clear. And Fergie just sat back and must have went.
Did you know at that time, like going back to what we were saying about the Labour Party, kind of knowing that the Tories are doing a good job of screwing themselves over, were you sitting there thinking, oh, here we go?
Oh, aye, because you're looking at the team. They've got a great team, a really good team, functional team, a happy team, combative, competitive. And now they've got this guy they've got to fit in. As soon as they try to fit him in, who do you leave out? And got to leave it. Oh, well, we've got to change that around a little bit, or how do we do it? Well, we've got to. And that was the thing that changed the pathway that diverted the title from the northeast back to the northwest again. We were nowhere near the best.
People would assume if you're pushing for the title and then you sign a really good player, that would only help. Obviously, that's not the case.
But yeah, it has happened before. City did it with Rodney Marsh, didn't they? Before my time, I remember City, flying high and signing Rodney Marsh, and then they didn't really know what to do with him, and he sort of threw a spanner in the works. So it does happen. I suppose it comes down to good management and knowing what players are going to fit in. And famously, your United teams didn't really do that. They didn't just go out and buy someone just because they could. Ferguson was obviously knowledgeable enough to know who's going to fit there, and someone like Cantona, for example.
But Clough was like that as well, And then if he did buy a player, he would if he didn't fit in, didn't matter how much he paid for him or where he came from, he was out.
Yeah,
Shankly, Paisley, they all did the same thing, But whatever, as I say, for us, it was like, wow, why is he signing him? And then you because you've got when you'd have players who would meet up in the nursery duty, they would chit attacking forward, and you find out that what Sprayer was like, and he couldn't speak English for a start. How did they fit in? It was like a bit of a hand grenade thrown right into the dressing room and in their whole kind of thing, and it imploded.
Life with Brian, life with Brian, life with Brian.
Talking of political heavyweights like we just were, Mark, you had a question about the political party podcast.
Yeah, well, you've obviously had a lot of stellar guests from all sides of the divide on your podcast, Matt. Ministers, party leaders, and experts, even Gary Neville. Were there any that you thought you could go for a pint with? And as you've already alluded to, there are some pretty shady characters amongst them.
Do you know what? I think I could probably go for a pint with most of them. Because most of them are quite interesting, even if you disagree with them. I mean, obviously, I think partly why the Knights are such a success is talking is what politicians do. So it's not like if you interview, they're really good. Even the bad ones, they talk all day long. So like even the shit ones get a phrase and then hone it, and they get really good at making arguments or whatever. Talking is kind of the essence of what they do. Whereas if you're interviewing anyone from almost any other walk of life, you're asking them about, a footballer plays football, and then you can interview them about it. But actual talking is the kind of skill that they've got. So if you see a great orator live, firstly, there's something really impressive about, even if you disagree with them, or someone like William Hague, who's really funny, who can tell stories. People go, oh my God, what a character. But he's been honing those stories for years, almost like a comedian would, because they're talking all the time. They're trying to persuade, whether it's in Parliament or in the party or on TV. They're really good. Even the ones that you might think, oh, fucking hell, you see them live, some of them are phenomenal communicators. So in that regard, they're quite good company. They've got a lot of stories. A lot of them are good gossips as well. So you get like behind the scenes stuff, particularly if you give them alcohol. I mean, some of the ones, I remember going out drinking with David Davis years ago. I had him on maybe years before Brexit. And, doing the bar, I'd always invite them for a drink afterwards, and we'd have a glass. I mean, he drank, I would say, at least 2 bottles of red wine himself and showed no sign of having consumed alcohol at all. Was like a trode. I wasn't like doing it to show off. He would just drink it and more would arrive. He would drink that and he was completely unchanged. And it was one of those ones where sometimes politicians, they will big themselves up a bit. But he was telling a story where we went, so people often say to me, you should have been Tory leader instead of David Cameron and all stuff like that. And you go, all right. We literally walk out of this bar to go to another one, and some bloke in the street goes, hey, you know David Davis? He goes, you should have been Tory leader, mate, instead of Cameron. He goes, oh, thank you very much. I thought, oh, well, that's quite funny because you just said that. we get in a cab. The taxi driver, we go down to Embankment, please, mate. But halfway through, the taxi driver goes, "You know David Davis?" Because, yeah, you should have been Tory leader, mate. Should have been you, not Cameron. You'd have been in government now. I was like, well, this is mad. Literally, the moment we get out the cab, some other bloke in the street goes, "Fucking hell, it's David Davis. You should have been Tory leader." And it was almost like, I mean, I'm sure he didn't set up this whole thing. But when he'd been telling me in the bar, I thought, yeah, right, people say that to you years later. Who the fuck even remembers? So then like 3 people within about 5 minutes did it. He was a good laugh. I mean, most of them, I hate to report, most of them from all parties are, the people I have on tend to be good fun.
I think that comes across in the show. I mean, again, I know I've said before, I'm a big fan of the show. I mean, what it is, I mean, sometimes you look at a guest and you think, I don't think I like them, and you might not necessarily like them because you're obviously, a Labour man, as we know, but you can sit and chat to them for an hour and 20 minutes. And it's a bit like maybe chat to a footballer of a team that you don't support. Once you get past that, they're people, they've got something to say and they've got a story to tell. And, I think that's what comes across really well in the show, is that you don't necessarily have to be a fan of someone. Quite the opposite. You can listen to and think, I think he's a knob, and then sometimes you'll end up, at the end of the show going, actually, he or she is a great guest. So
they've still got experience, and like even if you think of like the Hague years, you go, well, he was really talented, right? It wasn't his time, and he was never going to win that election. But hearing the stories about him and Michael Portillo behind the scenes, and what does the Tory Party do after 18 years in government, they're really interesting behind-the-scenes stories. It's really interesting to hear from a guy who's having to go up against Tony Blair at a general election and every week in the House of Commons, and how do you try and outwit him? And it is like, there's amazing things that you see, like the Coach's Voice and stuff like that, where they give you that insight. And you have to also be able to enjoy politics on that level, and also be open, not to like everything you've ever believed is wrong, but it's almost... I always think of it as, you're not trying to change anyone's mind. It's more that you just get a bit more context that helps. So I don't think anyone's going to listen to an episode with either Tony Blair or William Hague and come out and go, oh my God, I'm now ready to vote Labour or Conservative, having never previously thought. They just go, okay, well, I understand why he's Labour now, and I understand why Blair did that, or Hague did that, or Rees-Mogg thinks that. And it's just, they are still human beings, as much as some of them drive me mad. And their life experience has led them here, because they've had a different life to me, and I have to appreciate that. And they are still fascinating people. And obviously that line of work, the impact of it can be so big for all of us that I just find it endlessly fascinating. That comes to be in charge.
Yeah, that comes across, I think. I mean, to me, it comes across as it's like you're like a kid in a sweet shop. You're chatting to these guys who you were fascinated with. But I mean, was there anybody that didn't really live up to your expectations? I mean, you don't have to name names, but I mean, I can't think of any. I think I've listened to all of them.
Really? I mean, there are some where you do have to pinch yourself. I mean, the two a few months ago where I had Michael Heseltine on one fortnight and then Neil Kinnock the next. Yeah. And I just think it was partly because they're from a different generation. The ones I have on sometimes now, I'm almost getting towards a similar age. I'm 40 in a few weeks. So I'm getting towards the age that people would, certainly from the New Labour onwards, be in government at. You get ministers at 40. So I'm a sort of part of a generation in a way, whereas Kinnock and Heseltine, like they were on the news when I was at primary school. Like that, they belong to like a different era in a way. And obviously, since New Labour politics feels like it's been very different. So they're the ones where you almost can't believe you're sat opposite them. And not in a way that would make me deferential or not ask them questions. But you do think, how the fuck am I sat here next to Michael Heseltine in 2022? And he's like 7 foot tall. He is physically incredible. And he's still got like the trademark hair, and he looks... And he's still sharp as hell and dead funny. And Kinnock, like that guy, him and Thatcher, like, they were the dominant voices on the news when I was growing up.
Yeah. And what a voice.
Sat here, what an incredible guy. Just those two, especially recently, were incredible.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anyone you wouldn't have on? I mean, you've just been slagging off Boris Johnson, but I suppose, if the time came, if the opportunity came up,
I'd have him on in a heartbeat. I'd have Trump on, I'd have Truss on, of course, yeah, because whatever I think of them, I'm still interested in why they do stuff and the decisions they took. And I still want to, you always think, you're always slightly there in the hope that they'll tell you something they haven't told anyone else, that you'll be able to get to something. So it's fun and it's entertaining and it gives us all context. But there is part of you that thinks, they might just tell me something here that no one else has said. Can I get them to relax? And will they tell me something? And I just think that, and the audience who come are always there, and it gives it an intimacy. They think we're probably not going to hear that again. And that's, in a way, it is the same as sport. Like it is, to borrow the Sky Sports thing, it is only live once. And I think there is something about when so many things now exist as like box sets or whatever that are great entertainment. I think when you're in the room with someone like Heseltine or Kinnock or Blair, you go, this is a special... there's an atmosphere that people like that create. That sometimes it's about the seniority and stuff, but you do think, I'm in the room with someone here who has changed things about this country that we still live with. And I think that from an audience's point of view, and in a way, I'm just the person who's got the best seat in the house. There is like those ones are like, the atmosphere at those is absolutely incredible.
Who are your political heroes, Brian? I could probably, take a guess, but was there anyone particularly in your youth that you would have been a big fan of?
My local MP, Martin Edgindale, was John Smith. So he would have a column in the local paper every week. So and the kind of excitement of him becoming such a prominent person in that particular time, and I think he would have gone on to become a very, very good, if not great, Prime Minister.
But talking of politicians, we've got a game, haven't we, Mark?
Yes, regular listeners know that we occasionally throw in a little quiz into the podcast, and today's one of those days. After the success of What's the Story, Player or Tory, that we did ages ago with John Clough, we've got another politically themed quiz for you. This is subs bench to front bench, and the rules are pretty simple because God knows they have to be based on previous attempts. We're going to give you both the name of 5 footballers in turn, similar to a penalty shootout, and you have to tell us whether or not they went into politics after their playing career ended. So, if they did go into politics, you answer front bench, and if they didn't go into politics, you reply subs bench. Is that clear?
Yep.
Good. Okay, well...
Brian's looking confused.
I know, I don't think I can ever make it as simple as that. So, our guest always gets the pleasure of going first. So, Matt, here's your first one. It's former Turkey striker Hakan Şükür.
Front bench.
Back of the net. Yes, he became an MP in the Turkish parliament in 2011, but fell out of favour spectacularly with President Erdogan and is now in exile in the US under threat of arrest back home.
Oh, God.
Impressive.
It's lost its jaunty air, this quiz.
Okay, Chucky, your chance to make it 1-1. And your first one is legendary Brazilian playmaker Zico.
Zico, front bench.
He scores. Correct. He was briefly the Brazilian Minister for Sport in the early 1990s.
This is such a good quiz. I hope none of them have been executed.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, Matt, here's your second one. And it's Mexican goalkeeper Jorge Campos, he of the garish goalkeeper kits of the 90s.
Subs bench.
Oh, 2 for 2. Yes. Well, actually, he did. He did decide to run for the mayor of Acapulco, but he changed his mind to take up a coaching role in the MLS instead.
Do you know what? He's the first one that I've heard of, and I just thought I'd have heard if he'd have got elected. But he almost did.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm not going to talk myself out of a victory.
You won. Then so pressure's on you, Brian. The second one is former Belgium striker and head coach Mark Wilmots. Front bench or subs bench?
Subs bench.
Oh, he's missed. Front bench. He was elected to the Belgian Senate after hanging up his boots before getting into coaching.
Okay, Matt, here's your chance to extend.
Making this up.
No.
All this stuff.
Mark spent hours doing this.
Right, I've spent literally minutes with my extensive research on this. Okay. Right, Matt, so here's a chance for you to extend your lead. And this one is ex-Everton and Spurs defender Pat van den Hauwe.
Oh. I read something about him recently. Didn't he become a detective?
Be amazed if he did. I've been out for a drink with Pat van den Hauwe.
I'm going to say subs bench.
Oh, well, very good, very good. No help from Matt there, from Matthew at all there. No, actually, he didn't become a detective. And although a number of the mid-80s Everton side are known for their political views, Psycho Pat, as he was called, definitely did not turn to politics. And if you read his autobiography, you'll find out exactly what he did get up to after he finished playing.
What What did he get up to?
Well, I mean, he basically was he was into drugs and gangsterism, and he was into all sorts. He moved to South Africa. He married. You remember Mandy Smith, who had been married to what's he called from the Bill Wyman from the Rolling Stones? Yeah, that was all very iffy. And then Pat Van Der.
He was 14 at the time.
Yeah, well, as I said, very iffy. And then he basically he was lucky to be alive. So yeah, he's just about the last person you'd want in politics. Old Pat.
Oh my God.
Good fun to have a drink.
Sounds like a good resume to get into politics to me.
He's overqualified.
If he was in Mexico or somewhere, that would have been perfect.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think, where are we? Shock, isn't it now? So, Chocker, your third player is former Chelsea and France centre-back Frank Leboeuf.
Front bench. He was a mayor somewhere.
Not according to Mark's research. Subs bench. No. Frank has followed in the footsteps of your former teammate Eric Cantona and has gone into acting. In 2019, he appeared in the French version of The Masked Singer as a peacock.
That's acting, is it?
Okay, right, Matt, you're 3-1 up here. This, I think this is to clinch it, isn't it? Okay, so you've got a balding Bulgarian midfielder and star of USA 94, Jordan Lechkov.
Front bench.
Wow, 100%.
Yeah, your penalty record's a lot better than Brian.
Wow. Okay, well, we've already clinched this. Yes, he was the mayor of his town of Sliven. Hopefully I pronounced that right. But he was removed after a number of corruption scandals, which sounds familiar, eh?
I can't believe I got all four right.
We might as well, seeing as you've gone to all this effort, Mark, we might as well.
Oh, yeah, let's finish him off.
Yeah, play it out. So, Brian, it's Polish legend and top scorer at the 1974 World Cup, Grzegorz Lato.
Lato,
yeah.
Front bench.
Oh, yes. Sends the keeper the wrong way. Between 2001 and 2005, he was a senator for the Rajov regime. I don't know if that does.
Forget it.
All right.
He was in politics.
Okay, Matt, this is see if you can get the 100% 5 out of 5. Your final player is Polish goalkeeper Jan Tomaszewski, the man that Brian Clough publicly lambasted as being a clown right before he gave a man of the match performance at Wembley that helped to eliminate England from qualifying of the 1974 World Cup.
I remember seeing some sort of catch-up piece about him not that long ago. I'm obviously leaning to, whenever you say Polish, I always think it's more like Eastern Bloc. I always think is more likely. So I'm going to trust. Oh, but then I think you picked that because of Clough, and I feel like you're trying to like give me the eyes,
giving you the wobbly legs.
Yeah, give me the spaghetti legs.
I'm going to go with my gut and say front bench.
Oh, big round of applause. Well done. Yes.
No way.
Yes. You sent me the wrong way there. He was elected to the lower parliament in Poland in 2011 for Law and Justice, which is a right-wing populist party.
Oof.
I thought we were going to get your Clough impression of calling him a clown there, but we'll crack on. Brian, this is just for pride. To wrap it up, your final. No, well, we know that. Final player is former Soviet Union striker and Ballon d'Or winner Oleg Blokhin.
Oh, Blokhin.
Yeah.
Front bench.
Correct. Elected to the Ukrainian parliament on 2 occasions for 2 different political parties in the late 90s and early 2000s.
So magnificent side parting.
Yeah. I make that a 5-3 win for Matt. Is that right?
Yes.
Happy to get that.
Brian,
what do I win?
Yeah, we can send you a Live with Brian mug if you want.
Oh, please, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I've just actually ordered some this week. So
great. I'd love one.
Yes. Yeah, I've got lots of merch kicking around here, don't worry.
What other merch you got? Give some stuff.
He's got some You showed me a picture of some Brian McClare underpants the other day, Matthew. You don't have them on you, do you?
The Brian McClare. Hang on a minute.
No, he's going to go and get them. He's going to go and fetch them out of his laundry now.
Matt.
Oh, they're really good. Well, I thought they were going to be like cheap looking, but they look like they're very supportive as well. They look comfy.
Get some of these.
They're terrifying. They're comfy but terrifying.
McClare's mailbag. McClare's mailbag. McClare's mailbag.
It's our version of question time now. So, Matthew, can you please do the honours?
Okay. This one's from Martin, and he asked you both, which footballers do you think should move into politics?
Which footballers now?
Yeah, well, yeah, currently. Or even in your day, Brian. I mean, I can think of a few that you would have played with and you're probably good mates with.
I think that people who flirted with it in my generation and time and beliefs would be John Cahoon and Pat Nevin.
That's exactly who I'm thinking.
Well, I think that there have been several, but just because they had the same way that the country's been duped for years and years and years, would have very much been interested in right-wing and Tory politics because they thought that they had more money in their pockets. That meant they were better off. But they didn't understand about stealth tax. They didn't read in about those bits. It was just a matter of what was the highest rate of tax, and that's all they were interested in, which is always shocking and disappointing to me because they all came from the same places that, well, certainly Matt and I came from, not you because you're a Tory boy.
Oh, me?
Yeah, you might live in Liverpool now, but you're a you're Surbiton.
No, don't slur me on. Don't slur me in public like that. That's completely not true, listeners.
Did you live in Surbiton? I used to live in Surbiton.
No. I grew up in Reading, but Brian seems to think I'm from. He calls me a home counties boy.
That is the home counties, isn't it?
I suppose it is. I mean, I didn't like. I'm not a big fan of Reading. I got out of there as soon as I could.
You think moving to Liverpool's giving us some, credibility?
Yeah. But it's a lot cheaper, I know that, at the minute. At least I can get a pint for £2, do that in Edinburgh. Any footballers that you would like to see go into politics, Matt?
I think Neville and Carragher talk a lot of sense. I think they're both very passionate. Trying to think current ones, really, because I think Neville's an obvious choice, but who'd be good? It's sort of hard to... Southgate, I think, would be a good politician. I think he's very diplomatic. And I think he's got a social conscience. Rashford, I think, would be a great Labour MP.
Yeah.
So those two, I think Rashford and Southgate, I think would be great.
Was it on your show that Gary Neville was saying that basically he's not that keen to go into politics because he can't be a sort of, he'd be tied by party lines, so to speak. So at the minute he likes the platform of being able to speak out about things, but not actually be governed by the Labour Party. So,
well, exactly. The day-to-day job of an MP is different. It's not like being a mayor, and even then, if you're Gary Neville and you're like a CEO of a firm and you've got a broadcasting career and stuff like that, being an MP is a full-time job. You can't just sort of do it on the side. Certainly not with the profile he's got. Obviously, if you're not prepared to fully dedicate himself to it. And I think also, if you're a CEO, you're more akin to the sort of mindset of a prime minister. You're used to being the boss. Being a backbench MP, it would drive some people mad. I think a lot of high-achieving people think, I'll go into politics, and then they might look at it, and then years on the back benches while everyone else gets, it will drive some people insane. So I think you do need, it's a particular type of person, I think, at a particular stage of life that it appeals to. And I think it's always tempting to go, become mayor of this or mayor of that. And you think, well, does Gary Neville really want to have a full-time job about what day the bins go out, bus routes? Because this is the essence of it. Where do the speed humps go? Why isn't the dog shit getting picked up on Main Street? Where are the bollards gone? Are we closing that library or that thing? Politics is, people see the front end and they go, they could do it. The back end is most of it, and that is interminable, often having to make terrible decisions with what little money you've got. And I think
it's interesting.
That makes it a lot harder.
He seems to be more like a Labour cheerleader at the minute now, doesn't he? Yeah. Rather than, he was on stage with Keir Starmer in Liverpool, wasn't he, the other day? So he's obviously making an impact, but just in a different way, I suppose.
Well, exactly, and he can make a huge impact doing what he's doing like that. So then, in a way, why would he stop doing that? He'd be highly effective as a pro-Labour voice in the media, and he's a phenomenal communicator, and he does it very well. So I guess there's no need for him to change careers, really.
No, I agree. Complete change of gear. Chris Harris wants to know from both of you, what's the best gig you've ever been to? I reckon I could say answer Brian's for him.
Well, last birthday.
No, I was thinking you might say the Pogues.
Yeah, the Pogues in 83, I think, 84. Not sure which one.
Barrowland.
There was two different, Christmas-ish, 83, 45, some of that. I can't remember exactly the year. Pogues and Barrowlands.
Pogoing around.
I was actually pogoing, and it's like I was playing for Celtic at the time. It was like I wouldn't, people will ask you, and it may happen to you, and as you pass through your life, that they'll say to you, I bet you wish you were playing now. You go, why? You go, well, think all the money they're getting paid, and I'll go, no, because I've never had any desire to build an iron room in the middle, or a steel room in the middle of my house that I have to run to in case somebody wants to take my chattels,
Yeah.
I've always liked to free them about to walk my children to school, not take them with some bodyguards or whatever else it is. So no, and also that there are several things that you did when you were enjoying yourself that I'm sure that had they been caught on a camera phone, Alex Ferguson would have been quite happy to review them, if they're not already being posted on social media. So, that I tried to live. I think that I'm just the same as anyone else. I just did a series of extraordinary jobs. You've got an extraordinary job. These two have got extraordinary jobs as well. And that being able to go and enjoy yourself is the most important thing. Yeah, and I was pogoing in the middle of that floor in Barrowlands. Yeah,
I've always
you couldn't do anything else but doing that. The pogues certainly got you going.
Someone a few years ago at Brixton Academy, but it's probably not quite the same now. Like seeing them in their pomp would have been so much better.
Talking of floors moving, the floor bounces in the Barrowlands, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, the whole city bounces when the.
I remember Stuart Pearce telling me that he went to see the Dropkick Murphys.
Oh yeah,
at the Barrowlands because he just goes to gigs all the time. We've got a mutual friend who sorts tickets, and he said, "Ask him about what gigs he's seen." He went, "Yeah, I went to see the Dropkick Murphys at Barrowlands, and sorted out the ticket. Went on my own, and it was on St Paddy's Day, and." I was still playing for England at the time. I got a taxi from Glasgow Station, and the cabbie goes, "Fucking hell, psycho, what are you doing up in here on Paddy's Day?" So I'm going to see Dropkick Murphys at the Barrowlands. You want to watch out, son. He's got in here because everyone was fine, at the end of the day, people are all right, aren't they? But I was just like, fucking hell. He went on his own. Imagine going to see imagine going to any gig and seeing Stuart Pearce just there on his own. The Dropkick Murphys at the Barrowlands. Oh, man. So I've always, obviously, it's a famous venue, innit? I've been drinking around some of the pubs around there, like the old college bar and that, but I've never.
Yeah, we had a good session there. Another one of my birthdays, funnily enough, we spent drinking around there and, drinking Buckfast from the Optics. Remember?
Actually tastes nice, doesn't it? That's the problem.
I like Buckfast, yeah.
It's a lovely flavour.
Yeah, it's lethal, but it's
Moorish.
Yeah, as Brian would know, having been born in what's called the Buckfast Triangle, Brian knows all about the dangers of fortified.
Brian, have you ever been to the Ship Bank?
Where's that now?
So it's a pub. I think it's on the east. It's near Toll Cross. It's in the east end of the city centre of Glasgow. And on Sundays, they have a karaoke there, and it's like couples basically in their Sunday best, but they're probably in their, I would say 60s upwards, 60s, 70s, and 80s, all done out in their Sunday best in their hair. And it's a guy on a keyboard who's also of that generation. And people can pick songs and they get up and sing with him. And it's like sort of Phoenix Nights.
I think I know that guy. He used to perform in the Oriental Bar Glasgow as well, which is amazing.
And his show-stopping tune, and he's got to be 70 odd, is Human by the Killers. And he's amazing at it. But people just get up and it's obviously like £1 a pint or something like that as well. But it's such a joyous place. Every time I've been in there, it's packed. It's just all these oldies and they're, looking very, very dapper, getting up and singing just like a range of songs from all different generations.
What's the bar called?
The Ship Bank.
Oh, the Ship Bank. Right.
Yeah.
Put it on the list. Wait, I always say this. I think there's certain cities in the UK that lend themselves to those kind of pubs. I mean, Liverpool's certainly one of them. You go around on a Sunday afternoon and everywhere's packed and people in their ties and women dressed up and the nails and the hair. And, the Sunday nights are probably bigger than the Fridays and Saturdays for a certain generation. And it's great. I love it.
Sunday afternoons, you mean?
Well, Sunday afternoon, yeah. I mean, it'll be the death of me, but what a way to go. What was your gig, by the way, Matt?
Oh, Oasis at Wembley Stadium.
Oh, yeah.
2009. Saw them live a few times, but that was berserk.
That recently, yeah. You weren't at Nebworth, 96, no?
No, it was a little bit, I was a bit too young, really, and I didn't have any older siblings, so that was just slightly, I was a bit too young. I don't think my mum would have let me go to that. So I saw them later on, so I saw them in Nottingham and at Milton Keynes, and then 2009, Wembley Stadium, supported by Kasabian for 50 quid. They were always quite cheap to see Oasis, but being on the pitch on a hot summer's day, and they did about 2.5 hours, and it was absolutely sensational. Just like a mad, those like big mad gigs where the atmosphere is phenomenal. And their set list, I mean, I've seen the Rolling Stones since, saw McCartney at Glastonbury, and they're phenomenal. And they're just, but I think you'd struggle to beat an Oasis set list at the peak of their powers. There's not a single bad song in there. And they were just like a riot live, really funny. I remember seeing, so the day I saw them, the week before, they'd done Heaton Park in Manchester and the sound had cut out. So for so much of the gig, they'd had to offer refunds to the crowd. So this gig's a week later. And the thing that had happened in the intervening period was Michael Jackson's funeral. And just for context, and I remembered it at the time, because obviously it just happened, but when his coffin was being carried, people like Jermaine Jackson that carrying the coffin had been wearing aviator glasses. It was a very striking image anyway. The sound cuts out during Wonderwall at Wembley Stadium, and you can see them on the screens. And Noel Gallagher gets on the mic and goes, right, I just want to say now, categorically, no one is getting a refund, all right? Because that cost me a fucking fortune last week. He goes, while we sort this out, anyone got any Michael Jackson jokes? And everyone starts laughing. And the camera pans to Andy Bell, who's wearing aviators. And Noel Gallagher goes, don't know what you're laughing for. You look like you carried the coffin you got. I was like, what? This was like 90,000 people. Oh, my God. I remember that forever. You look like you carried the coffin you got.
Do you think you might see them back together again one day?
Nah, I'd love to. I always go and see them. I always go and see Noel and Liam on tour. I can't get enough of it, but I just don't think they'll ever. I don't think Noel Gallagher will ever get the band. And in a way, he's right not to. But part of me would love to go and see them again.
We've got one more question, and it's from our regular contributor, Cumbrian Dave, and here he is.
Hello, guys. I hope you're doing well. My father was a huge fan of the Labour leader John Smith before he sadly passed away in the early 90s. Does Matt think that John would have been a more popular and more successful Prime Minister than Tony Blair?
Well, he would have been exceptional. He would have been the best Prime Minister the country ever had. And he would have been different to Tony Blair. I mean, you'd still have got, I think you'd have still got peace in Northern Ireland. I think you'd have still got, obviously, Gordon Brown would have been Chancellor. You'd have still got Bank of England and Independent. So you'd have still got a lot of the stuff that you got with New Labour. I don't think he would have won as many seats. I don't think he had, for all his huge talents, Blair had a supernatural ability to basically appeal to everyone. And in the end, obviously, that meant that when someone that popular becomes unpopular, it's a harder crash for their reputation. So maybe in time, I mean, equally, I do think that as time goes by, people do look at Tony Blair more favourably. And obviously, the vast majority of people probably do disagree with Iraq. But everything else, they go, well, actually, he was really good at it. And I think the same for John Smith. I think he would have been very successful. He would have won multiple elections for Labour. Would have done a lot of good. And it's just, obviously, it's like anything. And it's similar to a point I was making earlier. That was his moment, John Smith. And he was the person at that point that was going to win that general election for Labour. And it's a shame for him that he didn't get to do it. And obviously it's a shame for the country that we didn't get someone who would have been a real humanitarian and a very special person. But we got Tony Blair, who was, was able to deliver election victories like no one the Labour Party's ever produced. So I don't think he'd have been as popular at the time.
I suppose the question is, though, what would have happened to Blair if John Smith had won that election?
Oh, man. I love that sort of counterfactual thing. So he'd have been what, Home Secretary?
Yeah, and would he have ever? Do you think he would have got the job eventually at some? I mean, I can't imagine him waiting in the shadows for too long.
I think of all the people that have been Prime Minister, he's the hardest to imagine not ever doing it.
Yeah,
like he's such an obvious Prime Minister in terms of just like the way he is. But But then you think, obviously that's because he's talented, but the role obviously does something to you as well. Like he grew into it. I don't think Boris Johnson did, and I don't think Liz Truss ever will, but he definitely did. Sort of odd to imagine that he might have gone off for this. You know, like Rishi Sunak was like, I'm just going to go to California.
Yeah, I didn't think it wasn't until you mentioned it there that it just came to my mind. Because there's obviously that famous picture of at the funeral, you know, the Blair walking behind the coffin orders, and it's, you know, it's
the big benefit for Tony Blair and New Labour was that John Smith had already won those battles with the old Labour Party. So he'd already squared that all away, and they were all ready to go in with the campaign that eventually led to Labour coming back into power. So Tony and everyone else in the country benefited from him sticking to what he thought was a cohesive idea of how they could actually win, not necessarily be, you know, say that they're going to do everything that's the most popular thing, but to get a Labour Party that's electable.
And Kinnock as well. Yeah. Kinnock. I mean, so many people did the work that Blair was able to make very light work of. Kinnock and Smith.
Yeah. Well, you said that, didn't you? When you had Kinnock on a few months ago. I mean, you basically said that he not he's unsung, but you know he did a lot of the groundwork to put Labour. Well, if it hadn't been for Kinnock, you know, nothing else would have followed essentially. And
you can't underestimate. I mean, people saw it a little bit in the Corbyn years, like how the Labour Party can go when it drifts off. And not just in terms of like ideologically, but how the behaviour deteriorates, people shouting and all that sort of thing. And in the 80s, it was way worse when Militant tried to take over the Labour Party. You had like Kinnock giving a party conference speech where it's like mayhem in the hall. He thought he was going to get punched in the face at one point. You know, it was genuine, like the party was breaking down. It was physical violence. People used to get punched in the face. Like it was like a fucking... You can't underestimate how severe the party had really broken down. And imagine Tony Blair having to deal with that. Kinnock had to do all the dirty work over 2 terms to face down Tony Benn, face down the hard left, and effectively wrestle back control of the party and make them professional. And that was something we were talking about earlier about how like talented they were. The Labour Party had to professionalise it. It had been a rabble for so long that the country was just constantly telling it would never vote for. So to smarten up in every way, like to tidy up their act, but actually look presentable as a politician and behave in a particular way. And obviously, Kinnock did so much of that. And then the crucial thing as well that John Smith brought as well, economic credibility. People absolutely trusted him with the economy. And that was the thing that for so long Labour had not been trusted on. And John Smith was crucial in making people trust Labour with their money. He was a remarkable economic brain.
Well, that's it. We've got to the end of the mailbag.
Yeah.
Fellas.
Yeah, so let's bring proceedings to a close by first thanking our wonderful guest and quiz winner, Matt Forde. Matt, remind our listeners what you've got coming up and where they can find the Political Party podcast and all your live gigs and so on coming up.
Yes, so you can find the Political Party on all podcast providers, Apple Podcasts and whatever else. I'm doing 3 London dates, the last 3 performances of my stand-up show, Clowns to the left of me, Jokers to the right, which I'm just finding the dates of. They are on the 18th of October at the Leicester Square Theatre, the 21st of October at the Bloomsbury Theatre, and the 28th of October at the Bloomsbury Theatre. And it's a stand-up show where I take the piss out of everyone. And the Political Party is on every fortnight at the Duchess Theatre. My guest on Monday, the 3rd of October, is Mick Lynch, the General Secretary of the RMT, who's been everywhere. Just amazing. And then future guests include Matt Hancock, David Dimbleby, and Rachel Reeves.
There's some great guests coming up. I imagine you're already prepping your Mick Lynch.
I can't wait for that. He's so good. Just that clip when he was on with that Chris Philp guy who was everywhere yesterday, when he just keeps going to him, "You're lying. You're a liar. Stop lying." It's an amazing way to demolish a minister live on telly. "You're lying." Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
Fantastic. Good luck with those, Matt, and thanks very much again for coming on.
Fellas, this has been a privilege. It really has. A pleasure to meet all 3 of you. Yeah. Ryan,
thank you, sir.
Such a megastar. This has been a real treat. Thank you. And if
you're
ever in London, let me know.
Yes, well, I want to come down to... well, my brother lives in London, so I'm down there quite a bit, but I definitely want to come to
great. Yeah, please do.
Because it's, like I say, it is a big... it's a very popular podcast in my household.
Oh, great. Well, if you want to come to one, let me know and I'll get you in.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Have a Live for Brian night out. We'll all get to the pub afterwards with Mick Lynch.
Well, we did do a live with Brian in Ireland a few months back, so we'll have to do some more live dates.
See if you can get David Davis along for shits and giggles.
See you, fellas.
Thanks, Matt. Take care.
Cheers, thank you.
We'll be in touch. Thank you. Brian, Matthew, thanks as ever, gentlemen. Always a pleasure.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much for your company and your bon vivant.
Right. Thank you. Thank you all.
And of course, a big thanks to you for tuning in. We wouldn't be here without you doing so. We hope to see you again next time. Just the usual reminder to subscribe to Life with Brian wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on both Twitter and Instagram at Brian McClare Pod. So until next time, take care.
Life with Brian. Life with Brian. Talking films or music. Life with Brian. Talking TV and food. Life with Brian. Talking trivia and exercise. Life with Brian. It's different every episode. Life with Brian. Talking politics and football. Life with Brian. It's different every episode. Life with Brian. Life with Brian.